Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar all about ZoomInfo's MCP. My name is Katie McMahon. I am a senior manager here for our professional services organization. So what that means is that I actually work directly with a lot of our customers, trying to help them get the most out of their data combined with ZoomInfo data. And increasingly these days, that has meant the MCP and what that can do for folks. So we're excited to talk about that today with you all and show you how you can start to use it in your everyday. I'm joined today by Adam. I'll kick it over to Adam really quick to introduce himself.
Nice. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, really happy to be here. I'm Adam. I'm one of our product VPs, and MCP's one of the products that rolls up to me. And I also spend a lot of time with our customers, mostly our strategic and enterprise customers. I get to see the really cool things they're doing with MCP. I get to see the things they're trying to do, the things that aren't really working as they're trying to transform their go-to-market org. And every day I see organizations where MCP is becoming more of a keystone to their go-to-market strategy and how they're enabling their sellers. So really excited to be here. Looking forward to walking through.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so for everybody here today, so I think the plan is, I actually come from a pretty technical background, app development and data engineering. And even for me, when some of this MCP technology started to come out, I was intimidated. And so a big part of this and my goal is to make you all feel comfortable, not just with how to use the ZoomInfo MCP, but to understand what an MCP actually is, what that means, and feel confident when you're actually crafting prompts and using it, that you know what you're doing. So with that, we're going to go through some brief slides that are to that aim. And then I'm going to jump directly into live demos with live prompting against the MCP in both Claude and ChatGPT as sort of the two most common places that folks are interacting with that today, especially for this end user audience. But there's a lot of other places you can use it, as we'll see. So with that, I am going to jump right in. First, really quickly, I just wanted to give our safe harbor statement. This presentation, some more commentary, might contain future-looking statements that reflect current views. Basically, please do not use this to do any trading or make any financial decisions. Awesome. Okay, so let's start with, like I said, MCP 101, the very basics. So the biggest thing here is just what is MCP? So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It's an open standard. It was created by Anthropic, and essentially it lets AI models connect to tools and data through a single standard interface. So I think the best way to think of it is sort of a universal language that lets any AI model speak to a data source. I think some of the biggest things to know here, it's a universal term and it's an open protocol. It's not something that ZoomInfo created. Anthropic created it and they donated it as an open standard for the industry. And so ZoomInfo essentially built a server that speaks MCP. It gives any AI model access to ZoomInfo's best-in-class data underneath everything. What that means, one of the biggest things that was confusing for me when I first jumped into this was it sort of sounds like an API. How is this different? What are the differences? And so even if you are not technical in your day-to-day and life, and you're going to be using this primarily in LLMs or front end, I actually think it's really useful to just understand the differences between MCP and an API. So this is just a really high level difference between the two. So with APIs, the main goal is that it's software to software, whereas an MCP is really all about AI to data. In terms of who uses it, an API is typically developers. They're going to write code. It's going to connect one, like it says, software to another software. Whereas in MCP, AI agents are using it on behalf of users based on the prompting that they're providing into that interface. In terms of how you connect it, API is often a custom integration depending on the service, whereas MCP is sort of connect once and AI is going to discover the tools. And we're going to go in depth in a minute about what that actually means and how MCP puts those tools together. In terms of general discovery, APIs often have these big, complicated docs and you need to understand specs. It's much more developer focused. Whereas with the MCP, the AI is going to ask what you can do and sort of interpolate about that automatically. And then in terms of flexibility, an API often has specific fixed endpoints to do specific tasks, whereas an MCP is dynamic. There's a bunch of tools underneath, and the AI is going to decide what to call. And so again, I'm not going to spend too much time here. This is not meant to be a technical course, but I really do think one of the biggest things that I've seen with our customers in terms of a point of confusion about MCP is how is this different from API or even from ZoomInfo's API, which is another endpoint, an access point to our data that we do have and that is still available for customers for specific use cases and integrations. Awesome. So I think I want to go back. I saw this presented to me in this way, and I actually think it is one of the best ways to understand what an MCP does. This is the thing that finally clicked it into place in my brain. And so basically it's thinking about an MCP as a chef. And so the idea here is that you make a request, you order, and you do this in natural language through your chat interface, if you're in Claude or ChatGPT, et cetera. Something like use ZoomInfo to find buying signals for Notion. And then the MCP, as the chef, is going to first review its available tools. So it has the order, and it's going to say, okay, I need to make this order. What can I use to make this order? And so what you see there listed in the purple, you don't need to know for any intents and purposes those actual terms, but those are under the scenes, the tools that are available in the ZoomInfo MCP that essentially the AI, the server, can look at and use and combine to create the order that you just submitted. And so if you're thinking of it in terms of the chef analogy, it's the knives, the pots and pans, the different things that the chef has available in the kitchen to actually craft the meal. So first it's going to take your order, then it's going to review, okay, what do I have to create this order? And then it's going to actually do the cooking. So it's going to call those tools, it's going to get data back, and then it's going to combine up the ingredients in things that are more, human readable outputs of things like intent signals and company profile and scoops and triggers. If you're thinking specifically about the ZoomInfo MCP, it's going to turn that into a combined dish and put intelligence on top of it. And then you get the finished result. So back in your window, you're going to get a nice report or list, depending on the type of submission that you put in terms of things like buying signals with context, recommended next steps. It's really actionable intelligence. It's ready to use. You don't have to tab switch. It's all just right there for you. So in summary, you're submitting an order. The MCP is looking at what tools it has available. It's using those tools to craft the response, and then it's serving it back to the end interface where you ultimately requested it. Okay, really briefly here, and then we'll jump into the specifics of the ZoomInfo MCP, and then we're going to get into the fun stuff and actually demo a whole bunch of prompts. How that actually works, what that looks like, everything I just described. You ask, the AI uses pattern matching based on your ask to figure out which tools it should use. And then the backend server is doing the processing, it's hitting databases and all the typical things where the data is stored behind the scenes. It's returning the data, and then the final layer, the AI is synthesizing it and returning it back up. So an example prompt might be use ZoomInfo to find VP level marketing contacts at healthcare companies with 500 plus employees in Boston. 5 steps are actually happening, but it's one seamless response that you're going to see in your end state. And there's verified data at every single layer, which is such a huge part of this. Okay, so that's just MCP in a nutshell. And I should add here too, if folks have questions, please put them in the side chat. We have dedicated folks who are going to be answering them. I'm going to speak to common questions as I go through this that I've just heard from our customers, but we have folks dedicated to answering questions as we go in the chat. Awesome. So let's dive into our ZoomInfo specific MCP and get a little more information about that before we show it off live. So where it lives, and actually I'm going to dive into this. This is a little bit outdated, but the main thing to take away is that there are native connectors and then there are other MCP compatible environments. So today we're really focused on the tier 1 native connectors. These are things, think about, they have like a marketplace or an app store. Essentially, you're going to just go in, be able to select the ZoomInfo connector, log in, and it goes, right? One click, not a lot of setup needed. There are additional expanded options where it's still MCP compatible, but there might be a little bit more work where the customer needs to point to a server, et cetera. So I think this is a fast-moving industry. Literally, since we put this together, a few things have actually moved from tier 2 into tier 1. The main ones are Gemini, Microsoft 365 Copilot, Claude Code, and Perplexity. So those are all actually available with native connectors now. And so, like I said, today's focus is really going to be on Claude and ChatGPT, but we're going to have some deeper enablement coming soon in future builder sessions. Awesome. Cool. So the next thing I really want to go through is what are the pieces of our MCP? So there's a bunch of tools, and I'm going to show you what they actually are in a minute. I think, when I even first started using our MCP, I was very confused how the prompt, the sentence that I wrote actually turned into things. And so I am going to go through all of the pieces so that my goal is that hopefully you feel comfortable understanding what prompts you're writing and how they're actually working behind the scenes. But to really frame it out broadly to start, you can think of our MCP as having sort of three depths of intelligence. So there's search, which is super broad, and it's also free, which is really awesome. This is not using any credits, anything at all. You have to just have a valid ZoomInfo account that you're logged into. But beyond that, this is not actually costing anything. And so with the search, you can look up lists of companies or contacts, things matching essentially filters. You can get back up to 100 results. Broad coverage, no cost. This is often where prompts will start, and how you can use this effectively will show in the prompting and demo sections. The next level is Enrich. So great, you've run a search, you found a list of companies or contacts matching your ICP or some kind of intent spike you're looking at. Now you need to actually understand a little bit more about the data. So you can get additional data about those companies. You can also get additional data about scoops and intent and the types of things that you're probably used to if you're familiar with the ZoomInfo platform. So you can understand not just who to contact, but why and when to contact them. And then the last layer here, and this is using AI credits instead of the typical bulk credits, as you see sort of called out on the slide, is the ability to do research. And so this is actually like a fully AI synthesized narrative. If you have things like your CRM or conversation intelligence like Chorus connected, this can also integrate first-party and third-party data as long as it's integrated on the ZoomInfo platform. And this is going to give you a full narrative. So this is really for more things like meeting briefs or prep me for an account plan, things like that. So, it's good to think of it, start with a search, enrich that with information you might need, and then research for specific tasks where you might need to go a little bit deeper. So idea here is I wanted to actually really show this. So do not think in any way you need to remember, know, or understand any of the specific sort of more code looking designators with the underscore there, but those are the actual tools that sit within each of those buckets that I just mentioned. So within search, you can look up companies and contact. You can search some basic intent across companies and also scoops. Within Enrich, you can enrich companies and contacts, but then you can also enrich intent and news and scoops. Within research, you can do account research or contact research. And those are kind of the main tiers that we just talked about. It's worth mentioning that there's sort of a subcategory here of supplemental tools, I suppose. So with discovery, this is also part of search. You can find lookalikes, which is really important. So maybe you looked up a list of companies and you might want to find more companies that look like that, or you have a couple examples of some great closed won accounts that fit your ICP, and you want to find similar companies that fit that experience. You can look up companies or contacts or get recommended contacts, which can be an AI ranking of who to contact. Another really cool thing, actually, this is related to some of the features we just rolled out, is you can also access our go-to-market configuration. And we'll see this in one of the prompts, but basically, you can provide ZoomInfo systems, not just the MCP, with context about your company and the competitors you have and priorities and products and all the type of things that make a customized, say, outreach sequence or even just understanding your business model and what you might care about way more personalized so that you don't have to put that into every single prompt. And so you can read from that config for free, which is going to just give it the context that it needs. But if you wanted to, depending on the use case, you can also update that GTM context if you happen to have the permissions. And the last thing is the lookup. And so I actually think this is useful to know if you want to know what intent topics can I, search off of or filter off of. You can actually just ask it to look up the different components that the MCP is capable of working against. So before we do our demos, I'm just going to really quickly sort of deep dive into the enrich and research tools to give you a little bit more information. So in terms of the enrichment, there's two types of intelligence here. You have profile enrichment. So this is companies and contacts. Basically, this is going to return who they are. It's all your typical, I feel like, ZoomInfo metrics that you're used to, right? Revenue and headcount and technographics, contact information is the type of data you might put into a CRM. And then, but you can also enrich with signals. And so this is the other rich interface component of the existing products. And this is going to tell you what's changing about these companies, what they care about. Are they a good account fit for you? Are they in market for you? Is there interest? Are they currently researching things? And so the idea is there's sort of the what, and then there's the why and when. And so the Enrich can hit across all of these. And so I think a key thing to think about here is for the signals, there's 3 different types. We have scoops, news, and intent. So scoops is essentially telling you what's happening inside of a company, things like leadership moves and funding and M&A, et cetera. News is obviously news, what's being written about them, especially there's a lot of financial coverage here around earnings and M&A, also things about leadership changes, person has moved, et cetera. And then lastly, intent, which is sort of what you know ZoomInfo for, I am sure. So topic level buying interest. And here we're actually going to be able to give you scores and audience strength, sort of showing the breadth of research. And this is going to be awesome for actually creating prospect lists and knowing when to act on them. So in summary, Enrich is going to tell you essentially who to call, and the signals are going to tell you when to call and what to say. And then in terms of the research tools, which is the deepest layer, so what we just talked about, the Enrich tools, those are going to return structured data from ZoomInfo's third-party database only. It's raw data. You can export it, you can sort it, you can put it in a CRM, you can act on it directly. Or the research tools are going to actually give you fully AI synthesized narratives. And so the idea here is, like I mentioned, that this is actually going to let you combine third-party and first-party data if you have it hooked up within your ZoomInfo integrations. So you don't have to separately have this hooked up in your interface window. You don't have to have the ZoomInfo MCP integration and then separately have your CRM integration. You can do that, and you can do different things with that. But as long as you have your CRM or conversation intelligence like Chorus synced to ZoomInfo already on the back end, the research tools can just access that information, and they can combine the third and first party data right there to give you account research or contact research. And so what's on here is just some examples of what you can do with that and what it's best for in terms of account research. That's really going to look at market data combined with, if you have it, this says Salesforce, but really it's whatever CRM you have connected out of some of the supported CRMs, which are shown at the bottom. It's going to help with meeting prep and deal reviews and account planning. And then contact research is obviously more for things like stakeholder mapping or champion building, outreach personalization in particular, especially if you're using this for sequences or an in-person meeting prep, a specific person versus, maybe a wider account QBR or something like that. So that's just kind of high level. I wanted to really make sure that folks understood all of the different component parts of our MCP. And the last thing I'm going to go through here, and then we're going to jump into actual demos and show you how some of this works, is how do you actually use it effectively? There are sort of some tips and tricks here. Better prompting is going to lead to better outcomes across the board. One of the biggest and probably the most important thing to remember is to name ZoomInfo in the prompt. So start your prompt with use ZoomInfo to or search ZoomInfo for. And that's going to be the biggest key, especially if you have multiple other integrations that might also provide account research. Otherwise, the AI is going to kind of make a best guess for where it should go. It might do a combination of things. It might just not be the outcome you expect. Also be really specific about what you're looking for in your prompts. If you're just generally telling it to tell me about Snowflake, you're going to get a Wikipedia summary. So really be specific about what you're using the data for, who you might be meeting with, your own personal role. That's actually one of the things that I love using AI for in general is role playing. So you can tell it both your role and the role of someone you might be meeting with and make sure the content and the request is customized to that. And then lastly, frame your goal. So not just the question, but what are you actually looking to get out of it? Explain the situation. Maybe you have a meeting with a specific person. You want to walk in prepared. You're going to specifically say it's with the VP of sales. So these are the 3 biggest things to keep in mind. Make sure you name ZoomInfo. Be really specific about what information you want back, and then frame your goal, not just your question. And then at the bottom, I've just got a few anchor phrases here that really help with this. So, like I said, the strongest is sort of use ZoomInfo to or search ZoomInfo for, enrich this in ZoomInfo, really explicitly calling us out. But as long as you're hitting the names of some of those tools that I mentioned on the last one, so explicitly calling out scoops or intent signals or signal score, that's usually always going to get you to the right place. And then sort of the medium is data points that we know we contain. So things like a verified business email or buying committee firmographic information, etc. And the last thing to mention here, again, before we jump into the demos, is that you can actually chain some of this together. So you can ask it to first do a search, and then enrich, and then check intent. If you have other connectors as well, other integrations connected beyond just ZoomInfo, you can also have it chain first do this in ZoomInfo, and then go and activate or orchestrate it somewhere else with another tool. So there's a ton of power here. A lot of this it's as good as your prompt. So awesome. Okay, so that is what I have for the slides. Hopefully that was not too many slides for folks, but I really wanted to make sure people felt comfortable with the understanding of MCP and what it is before we just jumped in and showed a bunch of windows within the live Claude and GPT interfaces. So let me just now bring that up instead. All right, so in ChatGPT, we are going to start with just a search. So like I said, this is super native in both ChatGPT and Claude. Before I actually run a search, I'm actually going to show you guys how to integrate with this. So mine's already logged in. If you click here within More in the ChatGPT window under Apps, and we'll bring up the App Store, this is what's going to show you all of the available integrations. So there's a ton of these that already exist. If you search for ZoomInfo, you're going to find the ZoomInfo MCP connector. All you need to do from there is click on it. And for me, this says Start Chat. But for you, it's going to actually say Integrate. You can click on it. It's going to bring you out to your ZoomInfo login. Essentially, you'll just log in, be it through a direct login or SSO, if that's what your company is using. And then you are ready to just start a chat. And so we can jump directly back to the chat interface. So from there, I am going to just grab my first prompt and type that in. So we're going to start with just a search. So this is completely free. This is essentially looking across our information. So saying use ZoomInfo, find director level and above contacts in sales at enterprise software companies that have 1,000+ employees in New York. So there's a few filter concepts we have in there, right? We have some industry filtering, we have some employee size filtering, headquarter location filtering. And then I'm being really specific. I'm asking it to just show me the top 10 with name, title, company, and management level. And you'll see here in the ChatGPT interface, it's just going to show you that you have the tool connected. So I'm going to go ahead and send the prompt, and we're going to see it go. So you can see that it's going to say, I'll use ZoomInfo's contact filters, search with the filters. You can actually see the app response. And this is something to call out in both interfaces. It's going to ask you if you want to continue. So here I'm going to say search contacts, and it's going to continue. But this is a nice stopgap to make sure that it's not running anything beyond what you're expecting. I know for sure in Claude, you can actually ask it to always approve. I think GPT is a little bit more judicious about making you approve it each time. And Adam, please feel free to speak up if there's any other tips and tricks on that front. But you'll see, I mean, this was relatively quick. It's gone in, it granted the access, it searched the right endpoint, and here it is. So here is just a list of 10 director and above sales leaders at an enterprise software company in the New York metro area. So that's great. I have a list. Now I probably want to actually do something with that list. So I'm going to ask it to grab these so you don't have to make me. I have these pre-written so you don't have to watch me type live on this call. We are going to ask it to, so I get my mouse back there. Sorry. I'm going to ask it to now enrich this list that I found. 3 of the companies. So Datadog, Cloudflare, and Monday. For each of these, now I want to know the employee count, revenue, HQ location, and founded year. And give me this as a comparison table. So we're going to run this. So this is now going to actually use enrichment. So it's going to use bulk credits. I will say this is one thing to note. If you already have these companies under management, this is not going to cost you additional credits. So we respect essentially records under management, regardless of where you're accessing the data. But if you've never enriched these companies before, it would cost at the typical bulk credit enrichment. So here it is. It's given me these 3 companies. Now I have the employee count, I have the revenue, I have the headquarter location and when they were founded. And you'll see these are like copyable tables. You can just like copy this out, bring it into another workspace, do something with it, or action off of it. And so then for the last bit here, I'm going to say, okay, cool. Out of all of these, I'm most interested in Datadog. And I am most interested in preparing for a meeting. So essentially, now I'm going to invoke the research tool. So I'm going to use ZoomInfo to research Datadog, preparing for a call with their head of sales, give me a quick briefing. What do they do? Include news, leadership changes, and what should I know going in? So we're going to let this go. And so this is going to actually hit our research tools that we had just mentioned. Let's go get some information as we go. And so just like before, it's going to ask me to approve the research. Right. Going to, and as one other interesting thing to note is, especially if you're chaining these requests together, where maybe you did an initial search and then you did an enrich, it's going to grab the ID from the prior search, which is definitely going to make things faster. I will say that the research-based components are always the ones that take the longest. So it's going to give you quite a lot back here. It's going to give you who they are, high level, what they do. This is the type of information you'd probably see on the ZoomInfo company page, but then they're going to expand on all of that. So it's going to give you product areas, it's going to give you revenue, leadership, and initial org context, mentioning that they're heavily enterprise focused now, summarizing some of the recent themes and news, looking at competitors and positioning against those competitors, and then why that would matter to the specific person that we're prepping for this meeting for. That's why it's so important to put that context in the prompt. It's even going to give you some discovery questions for the call and things to avoid. So all the types of things that you might use Copilot to do today, or that you might use your own internal chat interfaces if you have them, or even just, ChatGPT or Claude, you can now just use that in one place with the ZoomInfo connection from the get-go. So really exciting stuff. Before I switch over to Claude, Adam, anything to add generally or specifically around any tips and tricks you found with the ChatGPT interface?
It applies to ChatGPT, applies to Claude too. The other way you could research companies, and if you don't have ZoomInfo, you're going to make these requests and it's going to use web search. And it's going to find some general information. It's not going to find all of it. And it usually takes quite a bit longer. And one of the benefits to the ZoomInfo API and using it for these sorts of jobs is, and saying specifically use ZoomInfo, don't use web research, it's just much more efficient. Obviously, the data is much higher quality. The depth and breadth of the data is better. But from like a usage limits thing, which we all have in these chat interfaces, using ZoomInfo actually consumes less tokens, takes less time, and gets you a much better result. And so the reason we would say, hey, make sure you request it uses ZoomInfo and not like web research, is because web's obviously not going to be as good, but it will take longer and it will just pull tens of pages and consume more of your usage limits. And so it's much more efficient using ZoomInfo.
Yep, that's actually a great point. Yes, across the board. This was pretty quick for what was a pretty heavy research task. This probably would have taken at least double the time just in my own personal experience playing with ChatGPT and Claude. And it's also, I think, really important that you pointed out, it's reasonably concise. It's not just this like 6-page docket that you might get from your typical ChatGPT or Claude interface. It's sort of the key pieces that we have decided with our context layer behind the scenes are the most important for you to understand about this customer, consolidated up. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to Claude now. I'm going to show you how you can connect there, and then we're going to run through a whole bunch of different prompt examples in that environment as well. Okay, so can you guys see my Claude, or are you still seeing the GPT? Hold on, let me stop and specifically reshare that tab. Here's Claude, great. Okay, so in Claude, you don't have to go to the side interface to find the App Store. You can actually find it right here from this plus icon. and connectors. So you'll see for me, I already have it connected. If you do, you can toggle it on and off. You can manage. But if you've never used it and you're using it for the first time, you're going to come in here and you're going to click add a connector. Same thing. You can search. You should see ours pop up. And again, mine's already connected, but if you were here for the first time, it would ask you to connect and it would do the same thing, kick you out to a separate login page where you could either log in directly or with your SSO if that's what your company was doing. Okay, so for for Claude, we're gonna start with the same highest level, but we're gonna go a little bit deeper as we go through. So for Claude, we can do the exact same thing. So in this case, I'm going to say I'm in Waltham. So I'm in our Boston office. So I'm going to say, let's use ZoomInfo to search for B2B SaaS companies headquartered in Boston that have 200 to 2,000 employees. Give me the top 15 results as a table with company name, industry, employee count, revenue, and HQ location. One of the really cool things with Claude as it gets going here is that you can see the specific tools and requests as it goes in. I think you can see this to some extent with ChatGPT as well, but I really like the Claude interface. I will say that this one in particular has the always allow. I left it off to start just to show you all how that worked, but for now I am going to click always allow so that it doesn't have to go through this every time. But you'll see, as we mentioned with our chef analogy and with all the things I was showing you previously about the different tools, it's specifically going to go in off of my prompt and search for companies. So I go through, you can expand and actually see the request if you care about that information. And here we go. So we've got the top 15 B2B SaaS companies in the Boston metro area, sorted by employee count, which is awesome. It's actually also going to give you some commentary. ChatGPT did this too, in terms of things you might care about, right? So here it actually used the metro region instead of just the city. It's essentially saying you could, rerun super filtered in on the city. And it can also change the industry filter here. It's essentially explaining it was set to software with the B2B model, but giving you some context about how ZoomInfo company records are dealt with in that context. Awesome. So from there, we are going to go down a level just like we did last time. So for this one, we're going to go after Data Robot. So I'm going to ask it to now use ZoomInfo to enrich Data Robot. So I want to know similar things to last time: company profile, employee count, revenue, funding history, etc. We're going to do something more fun with it afterwards and actually go after intent and then look at email personalization. I think it's going to ask per time for that tool. So we're going to go ahead and let it allow. You can see again, how I mentioned, you can actually see which tools it's using. It's going to go after the Enrich companies this time. Data Robot, if we go back up, so they were listed as software, B2B, about 1,600 employees. That's great. It's going to give us some more information about their full company profile. Awesome. And you'll see it again, all things considered, it has very performant, especially when you have decent query and prompt logic in there to explicitly call out what you're looking for. So here's the full ZoomInfo profile on Data Robot, their website, what type of company they are, description, headquarter location, financials, headcount and things by department, funding history, if that's what you're looking for, which is really interesting in terms of series funding, etc. Links to their social media platform, and crucially, when the data was last refreshed by ZoomInfo. So you can see that this was actually refreshed today. This is very recent. And so it's asking me, do I want to pull recent scoops or intent or key executive contacts? And so that was the next thing that I wanted to show you. Rather than doing it just for Data Robot, I'm going to bring in one additional prompt, but you could continue on this exact path. I'm going to actually start by asking it to find any companies that are showing strong intent signals for cloud security with a score of 80 or higher, and give me the top 10 results. And from this, we're going to actually build a prospecting list. You'll see as before. Now we're actually searching intent signals. This is a new tool, so we're going to let it always allow. We'll let this run. Adam, any other tips or prompting things you can think of in the meantime while this is pulling up? Oh, it's pretty quick.
If you want to get really into advanced mode with Claude and ChatGPT, there's the artifact system they have, which we're not going to demo today, but you can ask for these tables in like a HTML view. You can ask for an interactive page. You can ask it to do roll-ups of data and summarize things and visualize them in charts and all kinds of stuff. We're really focused on the data retrieval part of this to show you how the MCP tools work. But you can ask it to put it in slide decks for you, for example, or export it as an Excel file or whatever you want to do there. So there's really cool stuff you can do once you have the data, but we're obviously very focused on showing you how to get the data right now.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great point. And in fact, even the slides that I showed you earlier were compiled in conjunction with some of our information, plus leveraging Claude's ability to do that. So that's an awesome point. Okay, so here's the result. So showing us top 10 companies with intent signals for cloud security. If you can see the signal score specifically and the audience strength and the signal date, it's giving us the company, the website. So now from here, so it's going to also give us a few observations about this data, right? How many matches there were. Obviously, we just grabbed the top 10. They all hit the ceiling score of 100. And they're all really recent because we were looking for just a small bit. But what we're going to do with this is from these intent results, pick the company with the highest score, which is going to be all of them. We'll do some tie breaking. And then use ZoomInfo to find the VP or the VP of IT security or the senior security officers at that company and enrich them with a verified email and a direct phone and their current title. And then from this, we're going to use it to actually do personalization and outreach. So we'll let that churn for a minute here and I'll queue up the next one. And you can see, yes, it had to deal with the tie and resolve that, as I had mentioned. So now it's going to search contacts after it went through that piece. And again, it just picked one. Of course, you could tell it what else to do. It's going to look, it picked M&T Bank. It's giving me the ZoomInfo company ID, which is useful in case you wanted to cross-reference. Again, if you wanted to get very specific details about what the actual tools are doing as it goes, you can expand this while it's thinking. I actually think it's really interesting to see sometimes exactly how it's routing through the different pieces. It found a bunch of contacts, but it's limiting them down to the best person. This is who it picked. It's a senior VP, cybersecurity director, when they started in their position, a verified business email, information about direct dials and LinkedIn. So this is our highest tier of contact accuracy. So they're likely a reachable person, they're likely employed. A few notes on what we asked for. Essentially, it couldn't find one of the titles. So based on their leadership structure, it gave us some other alternatives. And so from here, it's already sort of intuiting what we're going to do next. But we want to have it actually draft a short personalized outreach email. We want it to refer to their company's interest and intent. So essentially what they were researching, what those intent spikes were happening on. This is the when and why you're reaching out, and position our solution as the most relevant. And I'm also just telling it here to keep it brief. So we'll let it go, and it's actually going to draft up an email. I think it'll probably give us a couple examples to choose from based on other times I have used both Claude and our internal tools that sync into the Anthropic models to do this. Adam, any other topics on, would love any thoughts on sort of just personalization strategies within this?
We touched on the tool earlier. If you have the config set up for who you are and what you sell, you can also ask Claude to bring that into this email writing engagement process to consider who you are, what your company is, what you sell. And one quick tip I'll give, which is if you do want to try that and it isn't set up, you can open Claude or ChatGPT. You can say, hey, I want to set up my go-to-market config with ZoomInfo. This is my company website. Here's my LinkedIn profile. Can you fill that out and write it back for me? And so you can actually have the assistant set that up for you if you really want to do that, if it's not set up already. But bringing it in means it has knowledge of your products, who you are, ICP, that sort of stuff. And it helps with personalizing emails. Claude does a pretty good job anyway. But we all know emails, the more personalized they are, the more relevant, the less sort of spammy they seem. So it's worthwhile.
Yep. Awesome. No, that's a great tip. And I believe, maybe not this time, but other times I was working through this, it's specifically, I've seen it mentioned that it's exactly grabbing the context tool. So Awesome. So it gave us essentially two options here, right? Do you want to go after the governance angle, or do you want to go after the peer benchmarking angle? And so it's giving me, human in the loop version of this. This is not something that, as it's crafted right here, you would just set up to work with an automation, but you can absolutely pursue that if you put in some more complex prompting and have other integrations that might be able to do that at scale. But it gave us two drafted emails. You can actually go ahead and just open that in your mail. And it's going to give you some information about how to choose between them, etc., what to update. Awesome. So the last thing that I want to show here is a way to sort of chain this all together. So I think we've sort of looked at all the different tools. We've looked at search. We've looked at running enrichments. We've done sort of the company brief that we did in ChatGPT. One of the things I had talked about earlier was that this gets really useful when you start to actually chain these things together. So this is an example of sort of a chained prompt that's going to tag in a whole bunch of those different tiers of the MCP. So they're saying, okay, I sell data integration software to mid-market, use ZoomInfo to find 5 companies similar to Fivetran. For each of these, find the VP of engineering or the VP of data, enrich them with email and phone, and then format this all as a prospecting table that I can export. So I'm going to let this run, and we'll see here that it's going to actually chain through all of these different pieces. And after this, we're going to have Adam talk through some of our forward-looking sort of what's next for MCP and where we're going. But Adam, any other last thoughts sort of on prompt engineering or tips and tricks within these LLM interfaces while this processes and before we get to that point?
I have just a general tip, I think, about working with LLMs, and it applies to ZoomInfo. These are sort of blank canvas, open-end text box, and we've all played with them. We've all got different techniques for working with them. I think as you ran through it with some of the prompt techniques earlier, LLMs are pretty good at discerning a path if you give them very clear goals. And the more specific you can be, include what you want to achieve. If you know specifically how you want to get there, that's awesome too. But generally where I see people succeeding, get like huge leverage, is that they're taking something they would do anyway, like a workflow that they're already running, a play they run every day, a motion they run every day, and they sort of think about how to break that down into this format, which might be a little different from how they were doing it, in an app or something. And that's where I see people succeed. The kind of failure mode is open-ended, vague, what can I, and then the second part I'll say on that is like, this is a very forgiving environment. You can experiment a lot in these environments, right? Mostly it's not writing back data to places where it's going to create issues like in your CRM or anything. And so like play around, try and push it as far as you can. And I'm surprised all the time, especially as new models come out, how far you can push these things to help you with your work. So that'd be my two main things.
No, I think that's awesome. And to that end, right, you can use this in the same way that you would select a model, right, in any other prompt. So right now I'm using Opus 4.7, but if you don't need that level of power, you're asking a very simple question, this can be combined with whatever model you want for the task at hand. So that's probably worth mentioning. And so you can see here, just to go back through all the steps, right? So it realized it needed a bunch of steps. It ran a lookalike algorithm. We had talked about that in some of the options. It's going to grab its top 5 most relevant picks based on that prospecting use case. Then it's going to go through and find these contacts that we asked for, and it's going to get it ready in an exportable format. It enriched all of the contacts with email and phone, and now it's just creating essentially the output spreadsheet in the last step here for us. And then we're going to actually have a prospecting list that we could download and import into another system or do something with if we wanted to, or again, craft personalized emails based on all the information here and connect up and go out. Awesome. And so here we have it. And so to Adam's point, right, this is just a basic CSV-based table, but you can see this has all of the columns that you might expect from an enrichment or doing a bunch of research within the ZoomInfo platform. And you can get this same level of detail and granularity here, including the lookalike rank and scores, industry, revenue range, all of the different information you might want to get there. And I think in this preview view, it's compacting if things are empty. why it's looking like some of the columns are shifted. But this is just a CSV that I can then download from there, or in Excel, essentially. So it has given us all of the different outcomes. Awesome. So that's kind of the main set of content that I was hoping to go over here. Really big summaries from my pieces are: don't be scared of MCP. It's really not that scary of a concept. It's really just AI using a set of available tools from a given company to synthesize data from that company and then provide an AI contextualized output. You can use it wherever you have integrations, be them native connections or some of those more slightly more developer related integrations. And don't be scared of it. Craft good prompts and you can get really a ton out of the value. Adam, so I was going to kick it to you to end us here with just what is the future state, right? Where are we going with this? We have a ton that's accessible already, but can you just give us a little bit about where we're going next?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So MCP is pretty cool, right? Like it's connecting all of the tools we're all using every day in very interesting ways. It's allowing us to work with AI as kind of a partner in those tools that we use in our work life. And MCP is a protocol. So it was developed by Anthropic. It's an open standard protocol, and the protocol itself keeps developing continuously. Things like authentication, long-running sessions. I won't go into the technical details. It's probably not that interesting for this audience, but the main takeaway is that it's going to keep developing, and obviously we'll keep developing with that, as will ChatGPT and Claude and on all the other MCP tools that you use there. And that's going to enable cooler things in the future, like it'll remember what you're trying to do between requests, for example, session management. That's one aspect of it. One way to think about MCP is we saw our tools. The chef analogy is pretty good. There's only so many utensils you can put in the kitchen before your kitchen has too many in it and it's not useful anymore. You don't need 100 knives. You just need sort of 5 good ones. MCP is very similar to that. And so the actual tool roadmap for MCP, at least from ZoomInfo, we have more stuff coming alongside our regular product roadmap, supporting our product releases and making everything that you could access with ZoomInfo accessible via MCP. But you have most of that already today, to be honest. And so it's not the case that we're going to ship infinite MCP tools forever, and no one will, right, once you've kind of got the foundations down. But there is a layer above that that becomes really interesting, which is skills. And we didn't go into skills today, but Claude supports skills. I think ChatGPT is getting there in a different way, Gemini. And skills are really just preset-baked instructions of how to do a certain task using one or many MCPs and templates of what you would want to do. And you can include code snippets in there, so it runs different features of that more deterministically. And so actually a lot of our MCP and forward-looking roadmap now starts landing on skills. So the examples you gave, you can write that prompt every time. But we will start baking those into the MCP and we have a Claude plugin. So if you go to, this is worth saying to this audience, if you go to GTM.ai, that's a ZoomInfo website, firstly, it'll link you to all of the MCP connectors. So you can go connect to MCP via that. We'll point you to the marketplaces for Claude and OpenAI. You'll also see that there's hundreds of pre-baked audiences in the marketplace there. And the call to action is, if you click it, it's going to open that audience for you in Claude and OpenAI. And so that's part of our forward-looking roadmap too. We'll have an extremely robust marketplace of pre-baked audiences that you might want to work towards that you can open in those interfaces. And then the skills roadmap and the agent templates on top of that are really where we'll double down. And so we have the tools. You can ask the chef to make whatever you want, but if you think of the skills as pre-baked recipes of motions that you might want to run repeatedly that are very common in go-to-market, that's where a lot of our roadmap goes. And then our partnerships are the last part I'll say. And so you saw that even in the presentation we gave today, some of the interfaces that last 2 weeks required custom integration, we now have official partnerships with. They've moved over. That's just going to keep going. The great thing about MCP being standardized is it is really easy to get those integrations stood up. We just work with our partners at those vendors, Google, Microsoft. We make sure our marketplace listing is good. And so that's the other thing. If you have an interface where you would like to use MCP that's not listed in any of those things, you absolutely can. Almost every MCP client today supports custom MCPs. And so talk to your ZoomInfo partners if you're unsure. Talk to people like Katie who can help you. GTM.ai has guides on how to do custom integrations. And then the last thing I'm going to say is you can start with MCP today. If you go to GTM.ai and you haven't tried it, if you're a ZoomInfo customer, you have access to this. If you're not a ZoomInfo customer, you can start for free. You can just sign up. You'll get a free account with a free set of credits, and you can try it out. And so going back to the don't be afraid to experiment, I would encourage you to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, I just flashed it up real quick for folks, but this is the website that Adam was mentioning. So it's just generally accessible. You can just go to the GTM.ai that he was mentioning there to get it. Yep. Awesome. Well, I think that's the majority of what we have for folks today. Hopefully folks got their burning questions answered either just through what we were talking about or in the chat as things were coming in. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have other questions, and look forward to seeing all of the amazing things that folks are able to build with the MCP and our data. Good one.